The night was heavy, the kind of night that swallowed hope. Zuri sat in the back of a dark van, her wrists bound tightly with thick ropes. Her skin burned where the fibers dug in, but the sting was nothing compared to the storm inside her chest. Her heart thudded wildly, not from the darkness, but from the words she had just overheard. The voices of the only parents she had ever known. "She is of no use to us anymore." Her adoptive mother's voice rang sharp outside the van. "Take her. At least let her be good for something." Zuri froze. "No use?" The word rattled in her mind like broken glass. Her adoptive father's voice followed, low but bitter. A far cry from the man who once tucked her into bed when nightmares shook her. "Don't bring her back. From today, she's not our responsibility." Zuri's body went cold. Was this a nightmare? Were these really the same people who once called her daughter, who had smiled warmly at her when they found her years ago in Africa? She had been only a little girl then, an orphan, clinging to life with empty hands and a hungry stomach. They had wrapped her in new clothes, bought her sweets, and promised her a life of love and safety. She had believed them, but tonight, under the watch of strangers, they were selling her like she was nothing more than merchandise. The van door creaked open. A harsh beam of light spilled in, burning her teary eyes. Zuri squinted and lifted her head. A figure stepped forward. He was tall, towering almost, and dressed in a black tailored suit that seemed stitched from power itself. His jaw was sharp, his lips stern, and his hair fell perfectly against his forehead. But it was his eyes that silenced the air. Dark, piercing, unreadable. This was Jehun, the man people whispered about in corners. The Mafia boss of Seoul. Ruthless, arrogant, untouchable. But as his eyes fell on Zuri, tied and trembling, there was something in them that the rumors never spoke of. Something softer, something human. "She's the girl." Jehun's voice was deep, rolling like thunder. "Yes," her adoptive mother answered quickly, almost eagerly. Her smile was too wide, too greedy. "She's useless. She refuses to marry, refuses to listen. And look at her. Barren. We can't waste our money anymore." Jehun's gaze sharpened. "Barren?" His voice made even the night pause. Her father cleared his throat. "She's from a poor African background. Low class. No man wants her. Take her. Do as you please." Zuri's chest tightened. Every word cut like a blade. She wanted to scream, to remind them she was human, not the cruel labels they spit. But her voice stuck in her throat. Tears fell silently, each one a betrayal sliding down her cheeks. Jehun's eyes lingered on her face, studying her quiet defiance, the way she refused to beg despite the cruelty she endured. Slowly, without a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a knife. Zuri flinched, her heart skipping wildly. But instead of turning it on her, he bent down and cut the ropes around her wrists. The ropes fell to the floor with a thud. Zuri stared, stunned. Jehun straightened and fixed his cold gaze on the couple. "From now on," he said evenly, "no one touches her. She's mine." Her adoptive parents exchanged a look of relief, mistaking his words for possession, for ownership. To them, it didn't matter what happened next. They had washed their hands of her. But to Zuri, something in Jehun's tone felt different. Not ownership, but protection. His words carried a shield she had never known before. Jehun extended his hand. His palm was large, his fingers steady, his presence overwhelming. Zuri hesitated, her body trembling, but her heart urged her to move. Slowly, she placed her small, shaking hand into his. The warmth of his grip startled her. Firm, steady, unyielding. Jehun leaned closer, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You're safe now." Zuri's breath hitched. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. He led her out of the van. The cold night air wrapped around her. But with his hand locked on hers, the fear that had consumed her began to loosen, piece by piece. Behind them, her adoptive parents' voices faded into the night. They didn't call her back. They didn't apologize. They didn't care. Zuri swallowed hard. She wanted to hate them. She wanted to forget the years of false love, of empty promises. But a part of her, the little girl inside who once believed in them, shattered quietly, leaving her hollow. The world she had known was gone. Jihoon's car waited. A sleek black vehicle that mirrored the man himself. Powerful, commanding, dangerous. He opened the door for her, his movements precise, respectful. Zuri slid into the seat, her hands still trembling. Jihoon followed, his presence filling the space like smoke. For a long moment, silence lingered between them. The hum of the engine was the only sound. Finally, Jihoon spoke, his eyes fixed on the road. "They hurt you." Zuri blinked, unsure if it was a question or a statement. She looked down at her wrists, the red marks glaring against her skin. She swallowed, her voice a whisper. "They were supposed to love me." Jihoon's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the wheel, veins rising on his skin. "Then they were fools." Zuri's throat burned. She bit her lip, forcing back another wave of tears. Jihoon's voice softened, though it still carried the weight of command. "You're not theirs anymore. You belong to yourself." He glanced at her briefly, his eyes meeting hers. "And as long as you're with me, no one will ever break you again." Zuri stared at him, her heart racing. She didn't know this man. She didn't understand why he cared, or if she could even trust him. But in that moment, in the darkness of the night, Jihoon's words stitched a small thread of hope into the torn fabric of her soul. For the first time, she felt the faintest whisper of something she had thought she lost forever. Safety. The night in the van haunted Zuri's mind, but as she sat in Jihoon's car, memories of the past clawed their way back. Memories she had tried to bury, but which refused to die. Her story hadn't begun with betrayal. No, it had begun with a miracle. Zuri was 6 years old when she first saw them. She remembered the red dust of Nairobi swirling around the orphanage yard that morning. The sun was blazing, hanging heavy in the sky, and the cries of younger children filled the air. Some kids ran barefoot in circles, others clutched ragged dolls with missing eyes, and a few just sat quietly in corners, too tired to play. Zuri was among the quiet ones. She stood with her back against the cracked cement wall, her dress faded and torn at the hem. Her hair was uncombed, her shoes long gone. She watched the other children play with a longing she could never say out loud. Inside her heart was a hollow ache, the kind of ache that comes from being left behind too many times. Adults had come before, men and women with big smiles and clipboards. They walked through the yard, looking at the children as if choosing fruit at a market. Sometimes they would kneel down, ask names, stroke hair. Sometimes they would take a child's hand and leave with them. But they never chose Zuri. She was too dark, too skinny, too quiet. So she had taught herself not to hope. That was the day they came. A tall man and woman walked into the yard, guided by the orphanage director. Their skin was lighter than anyone she had ever seen in real life. They spoke in a language she didn't know, though sometimes they slipped into English. Their clothes were expensive, their shoes shining in the dusty sun. The man had a gentle smile that softened his whole face. His eyes scanned the yard with curiosity, but when they landed on Zuri, standing silently against the wall, something shifted in his expression. He didn't look away. The woman was beautiful, elegant, her black sunglasses perched high, her lips painted red. She looked around with caution, her gaze pausing only briefly on the children. But the man, he walked straight to Zuri. He crouched down so his face was level with hers. His smile was wide, genuine, and for the first time in her life, someone looked at her as if she mattered. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his accent heavy but his tone kind. Zuri swallowed. Her voice was small, but she answered, "Zuri." The man's smile deepened. "Zuri," he repeated slowly, savoring the sound. "Beautiful." Something bloomed in her chest, something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. That day, he and the woman took her out of the orphanage. It was only supposed to be a short trip, the director had explained, a small outing before any decisions were made. But to Zuri, it felt like magic. They took her to a supermarket in the city. She had never seen anything like it. The bright lights, the cold air conditioning, the shelves stacked with foods she couldn't name. The man crouched again in the toy aisle, pointing at dolls with shiny hair and sparkling dresses. "Choose," he said. Zuri's eyes widened. She hesitated, staring at the doll with the pink ribbons. She wanted it so badly, but fear held her back. What if he was joking? What if he got angry? The man chuckled softly and reached for the doll she had been staring at. He placed it gently in her arms. Yours. Her small fingers clutched the doll tightly, her throat burning. No one had ever bought her something so beautiful. They didn't stop there. They bought her shoes, shiny black ones with little straps. They bought her a dress, soft and pink, that swirled around her knees when she spun. They bought her biscuits, juice, and even chocolate. From now on, the man told her as he watched her eat shyly, "You will never lack." The woman finally smiled, though it was faint. She reached forward and brushed Zuri's cheek with perfectly manicured fingers. "Yes, you will be our daughter." The adoption process was not easy. It took months of papers, signatures, and endless meetings. But the man never gave up. Every time he saw Zuri, he reminded her that she was wanted. And when the day finally came, when he signed the last document and Zuri was placed in his care, she thought her heart might burst. For the first time, she belonged to someone. They flew to Korea together. Zuri remembered pressing her face to the airplane window, watching the land shrink beneath her. The orphanage disappeared, the red dust faded, and a new life stretched out ahead. When they landed in Seoul, the city dazzled her. Skyscrapers reached for the heavens, neon lights flashed brighter than stars. Cars zipped by faster than she could blink. It was overwhelming, terrifying, but also thrilling. The man held her hand tightly as they walked through the airport. "Don't be afraid," he told her. "You're home now." Home. The word tasted sweet. For a while, life was golden. They enrolled her in school, bought her more clothes than she could count, and filled her birthdays with cake and presents. The man, her father now, introduced her proudly to friends, always emphasizing, "This is my daughter." And Zuri, eager to be worthy of this new life, studied hard, obeyed rules, and tried to make them proud. But the world wasn't as kind as she hoped. Relatives frowned at her. Neighbors whispered. Classmates laughed at her skin, her hair, her accent. "Why adopt her?" people asked. "Don't you have enough children here?" She heard every word, felt every sting. But as long as her father smiled at her, she felt safe. The problem was her mother. The woman who had once bought her dolls began to change. Slowly at first, an extra frown, a cold silence at dinner, a sigh when Zuri walked into the room. And then the words began. "Zuri, don't eat too much. You must remember where you come from." Why do teachers praise her? Maybe they pity her because she is different. Each sentence chipped away at the golden life Zuri had been given. But her father always defended her. "She is my daughter. Blood doesn't matter." At those words, Zuri's heart soared. She believed that no matter what, he would protect her. But she didn't know that love, too, could be poisoned. And soon, her father's shield would begin to crack. Zuri woke up to the soft rustling of curtains. Sunlight spilled into the grand bedroom, painting golden streaks across the white silk sheets. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The heavy chandelier, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. This wasn't the miserable home she had come from. This was the Mafia Jihun Min Jae's house. In his world, they called him Min Jae. She sat up slowly, her eyes falling on the perfectly folded blanket on the sofa. He hadn't touched the bed. Just as he promised, Min Jae had given her all the space she needed. Her heart swelled a little with something she didn't understand. Gratitude mixed with curiosity. How could a man feared by so many, whispered about in every corner of Seoul, be so gentle with her? The door creaked, and Min Jae stepped in, his black shirt slightly unbuttoned, his hair damp from a shower. In his hands, he carried a tray with warm soup, steamed rice, and kimchi. "You're awake," he said, his voice calm, steady, almost too serious. "Eat." Zuri blinked. "You cooked this?" A faint smirk curved his lips. "I ordered it. Cooking is not my strength." "Not yet." She laughed softly, the sound almost surprising herself. It had been so long since laughter escaped her chest without fear of being silenced. She reached for the bowl, but he stopped her hand midway and placed the tray gently on her lap. "You need strength. You lost too much in that house," he said, his gaze darkening for a brief moment, as if remembering the bruises no one else cared to see. Zuri looked down, her throat tightening. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me. Min-jae sat on the edge of the bed, his expression unreadable. Because I saw myself in you. Her eyes lifted, puzzled. I know what it's like to be unwanted, to be hated for existing, to be blamed for things you never chose. His voice dropped lower, almost like a confession. When I took you from them, I wasn't just saving you. I was saving the part of me that never got rescued. Zuri's chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, but the way his jaw clenched told her that was a wound he didn't open easily. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Min-jae stood quickly, as though the air had grown too heavy. "Finish your food, then come downstairs. There's something I need to show you." The mansion was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Zuri followed him through wide hallways lined with art and glass. Everything screamed power, wealth, control. Yet there was a strange emptiness, as though the house had never known laughter or warmth. He led her into a large study. Shelves of leather-bound books lined the walls, and in the center stood a massive desk stacked with files. But it wasn't the desk that caught her attention. It was the hidden door he unlocked behind the shelves. Curiosity prickled her skin as he pushed it open. Inside was a smaller room filled with screens, maps, and documents. On one screen was her adoption file. On another, images of her adoptive parents smiling with politicians, dining with influential families. Zuri's stomach twisted. Why do you have this? Min-jae's eyes locked on hers. Because I don't make blind moves. I know everything about the people who hurt you. Every deal, every lie, every mask they wear for society. And if they ever try to touch you again, he leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. They'll regret it. Zuri's heart pounded. She should have been afraid. Everyone said he was ruthless, but instead she felt safe. Safe in a way she had never felt even as a child. They don't care about me, she said softly, almost to herself. They only call to pretend, to look good. Sometimes I wonder if I was just a trophy, a charity act. Min-jae studied her, then said firmly, "You are not anyone's trophy. You are not their shame. You are Zuri. And from today you decide who you become, not them." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not even the father who once protected her before turning cold. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice trembling. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, almost reluctantly, he replied, "Because for once, I wanted to save someone who still had light in them. My world is full of shadows. You remind me of something I thought I'd lost." Zuri's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to feel, so she simply nodded. That evening, Min-jae walked her to the balcony. The city glittered beneath them, neon lights dancing in the night. He handed her a phone. "What's this?" she asked. "Your freedom. Call who you want. Block who you don't. No one can control you here." Her hands shook slightly as she held it. She hadn't owned a phone in years. Her adoptive parents had taken hers away when they grew paranoid that she might tell the truth about their cruelty. But before she could press anything, the phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen. "Mother." Zuri froze. Her chest tightened. "Why now? Why so soon?" She answered with trembling fingers. "Hello." The voice on the other end was sugary sweet. "Zuri, my daughter. How are you? We've been so worried. Are you eating well? Is your husband treating you kindly?" Her throat clenched. The lies poured from that voice so easily, as though the same woman hadn't called her barren, dirty, useless. "I'm fine," Zuri said flatly. But before her mother could reply, Min-jae took the phone from her hand, put it on speaker, and said coldly, "She won't need your fake concern anymore. She is mine now. And unlike you, I don't throw away what I claim." There was a sharp gasp on the other end, followed by stammering words before the line went dead. Zuri's eyes widened. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." His gaze hardened. "You don't owe them politeness. Not after everything." Zuri felt her chest tighten with emotions she couldn't untangle. Relief, fear, gratitude, and something deeper she dared not name. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone was standing in front of her, shielding her completely. And that night, As she lay in bed, she whispered into the darkness. Maybe this house isn't so cold after all. The next morning, Zuri woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Back in her adoptive parents' house, mornings always began with shouting, orders, and the clatter of pots she was forced to scrub. The air had always been heavy, suffocating, filled with tension. But here, in Min-jae's home, the silence was peaceful. She sat up and stretched, her eyes landing on the small note left on the nightstand. Your schedule starts today. Don't be afraid. M. Her eyebrows knitted. Schedule? She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs. The dining table was already set, though untouched, as if waiting for her. Min-jae was there, his usual sharp suit hugging his frame, his expression calm but unreadable. Sit, he said, motioning toward the chair across from him. Zuri hesitated. Are we eating together? A small smirk curved his lips. Do you see anyone else here? Her cheeks flushed. She lowered herself onto the chair, trying not to stare at him too much. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows hit his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the faint shadow of a scar running down his neck. He looked every bit the ruthless Mafia leader the world feared. Yet here he was, pouring tea into her cup like it was the most natural thing in the world. As she took a sip, he leaned back. I've enrolled you in an international online university. Classes start this week. Your textbooks and laptop are in your room. Her eyes widened. You what? You need education, Min-jae said matter-of-factly. The best kind. And not in some neglected school where people pretend you don't belong. Here, you'll study at your own pace, from home, where no one can drag you down. Zuri's throat tightened. No one had ever invested in her future before. Her adoptive parents had tossed her into the cheapest university they could find, not caring if she sank or drowned. And now, this man who owed her nothing was opening doors she never thought she'd touch. Why? She asked softly. His gaze sharpened. Because you deserve it. And because I want you strong. Strong enough to stand beside me one day, not behind me. Her chest fluttered at his words. But before she could reply, he stood. Get ready. You're going out today. Her fork froze halfway to her lips. Out? Where? To see the city. To breathe. To remember that the world is bigger than the cage they built around you. The car ride into Seoul felt like stepping into another universe. Zuri sat by the window, her eyes wide as the skyline stretched high, neon lights flashing even in daylight. People bustled along sidewalks, stylish, busy, alive. It was overwhelming, but in a strangely beautiful way. Min-jae sat beside her, silent, watching her more than the passing streets. Have you ever been here before? He asked. She shook her head. Only once when I was very little. My adoptive parents took me shopping for clothes. But after that, no, they never let me explore. They said people would look at me funny, that I'd embarrass them. His jaw tightened. Cowards. The word startled her, but it made something inside her relax. It was as though he was voicing all the things she never had the courage to say. The car stopped outside a bookstore. Tall glass windows, shelves stretching endlessly inside. Zuri's heart raced. She had always loved books. Stories were the only escape she had back in that suffocating house. Min-jae opened the door for her. Choose whatever you want. No limits. Her breath caught. She stepped inside, her fingers brushing over spines of novels, poetry, history texts. Felt like touching freedom. For once, no one was pulling her away. No one was saying you don't need this. As she reached for a novel, she caught her reflection in the glass. Wide-eyed, timid, almost unsure if she belonged here. But then she saw Min-jae's reflection behind her, watching silently, almost protectively. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe she did belong. After the bookstore, he took her to a cafe tucked in a quiet alley. The walls were lined with plants, soft music playing in the background. It wasn't flashy, not like the high-end restaurants he could easily afford. But it was warm, cozy, alive. Why here? She asked as they sat down. Min-jae stirred his coffee slowly. Because this is the first place I came to when I decided I didn't want to be my father. Zuri blinked. Your father? He nodded, eyes darkening. A cruel man. Cold. Feared. He ruled with fists and blood. People expected me to be like him. For a long time I was, until one day I realized power without purpose is empty. Zuri studied him, her chest tightening. He rarely spoke about himself. His words were sharp, few, but they carried weight. She wanted to ask more, but his gaze lifted to hers, and she felt heat crawl up her neck. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said quietly. "No one will hurt you, not while you're with me." The sincerity in his voice made her eyes burn. She looked down quickly, afraid he'd see the tears gathering there. But not everyone in the cafe was as welcoming. At a nearby table, two young women whispered loudly, their eyes darting toward Zuri. "Isn't that the Mafia boss? Min-jae?" One murmured. "And who's the girl? She doesn't even look Korean. Must be one of his experiments." They giggled cruelly. Zuri's heart sank. She lowered her gaze, gripping her cup tightly. The sting of being different was all too familiar. But before the laughter could reach her ears again, Min-jae stood abruptly. His presence so commanding the entire cafe fell silent. He walked over to the women's table, his voice calm but sharp as glass. "You speak about her again," he said, his eyes locking onto them. "And I'll make sure the only thing you'll whisper about is how fast your teeth disappeared." The women paled, stumbling over apologies. Min-jae turned back, his gaze soft, as it landed on Zuri. He returned to their table, sat, and said simply, "Don't listen to them. They don't know you. They don't matter." Zuri swallowed hard, her chest trembling. No one had ever defended her like that. She stared at him, and for the first time, she saw the layers beneath his sharp exterior. Ruthless to the world, gentle to her. That night, back at the mansion, Zuri lay in bed clutching one of her new books. Her mind replayed the day. His words, his protection, his unexpected kindness. For years, she had lived in a world where love was conditional, where acceptance was a performance. But here, with Min-jae, she was slowly learning something new. Freedom wasn't just about leaving her cage. It was about finding someone who would guard her wings while she learned how to fly. And though their house was filled with shadows and silence, she realized with a trembling smile that she wasn't afraid anymore, because for the first time she wasn't alone. The following days in Min-jae's mansion unfolded like a dream Zuri wasn't sure she deserved. Each morning, she woke to sunlight instead of shouting. Each evening, she studied with her new laptop, immersing herself in lessons she once thought were forever out of reach. Books lined her nightstand, gifts he had chosen for her after watching which shelves her eyes lingered on at the bookstore. And Min-jae, he was always there, like a shadow that wasn't threatening but protective. He never invaded her space, never demanded anything from her, but his presence filled the air like an unspoken vow. Yet the more time Zuri spent with him, the more she began to notice things she hadn't before. The way his gaze softened when he thought she wasn't looking. The way his voice, usually sharp and commanding, grew quieter around her. The way he always made sure her plate was full before touching his own. He was a contradiction. A man the world feared, but in the silence of his home, he seemed almost gentle. And that contradiction made Zuri's chest flutter in ways she didn't know how to explain. One afternoon, while Min-jae was out on business, Zuri wandered into the music room. The grand piano gleamed in the corner, untouched, as though it had been waiting for someone. Her fingers itched. Back in Africa, before her life had been uprooted, she remembered sitting in the orphanage where a dusty, broken keyboard sat unused. Sometimes she would sneak in and press the keys, trying to match melodies she had heard in church. Music had always been her secret language, the one place she could pour her heart without judgment. Tentatively, she sat down and pressed a key. The sound was clear, pure, almost overwhelming. She pressed another, then another, until a soft tune filled the room. Her fingers moved slowly, uncertain, but the melody took shape, a lullaby she remembered from her childhood. She was so lost in the notes that she didn't hear the door open. When she finally looked up, Min-jae stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching silently. Her cheeks flushed. I didn't mean to." "Don't stop," he said quietly. Zuri blinked. "You like it." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. It's the first time this house has heard music. Keep playing. Her heart stuttered. She returned her gaze to the keys, her fingers trembling as she continued. When she finished, the silence hung heavy between them. Min-jae walked to her side, his hand brushing lightly against the polished wood. You've been holding too much inside. Let the music take it. Zuri swallowed hard. She wanted to ask him why he cared so much, why he always seemed to understand the things she didn't say. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You're not what people think you are." His lips curved faintly, but his eyes were sad. "And you're not what they tried to make you believe." The air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. The piano, the silence, the closeness of breaths that weren't supposed to meet. But Min-jae pulled back first, clearing his throat. "Dinner will be ready soon. Come downstairs when you're finished." Zuri watched him leave, her heart pounding. Something inside her had shifted, and she knew it wasn't going back. Later that night, a storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rolling deep in the distance. Zuri curled up on the couch with her book, but the storm made her uneasy. Memories of nights in her adoptive parents' house, where storms meant yelling and punishments, crawled back into her chest. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. Her heart leapt. She froze, clutching her blanket. The mansion, so vast and silent, felt like it had swallowed her whole. "Zuri?" The deep voice cut through the darkness. Relief washed over her. "Min-jae." He appeared with a flashlight, his tall frame outlined by the glow. "It's just the storm. Don't worry." She nodded quickly, but her body betrayed her fear. He noticed the way her hands shook, the way her breathing quickened. Without a word, he set the flashlight down and sat beside her. "You're safe," he said simply. Zuri's eyes burned. "I hate the dark. It reminds me of when they used to lock me in the storeroom. For hours. Sometimes all night." Rage flickered in his eyes, but his voice remained calm. "They'll never touch you again. Not while I'm alive." Her chest trembled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold onto that promise like it was the only anchor she had. Slowly, without realizing, she leaned against him. To her surprise, he didn't move away. Instead, he wrapped his arm lightly around her shoulders, steady and warm. The storm outside roared on, but inside, there was silence, a silence that felt safe. "Min-jae?" she whispered. Why do you keep protecting me like this? You barely know me." He paused. His hand tightened just slightly against her arm, then loosened again. "Because," he said finally, "sometimes one soul recognizes another, and no matter how much the world tries to break it, that recognition doesn't fade." Her throat closed. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, just leaned closer into his warmth. And in the quiet of the storm, something fragile but unshakable bloomed between them. The next morning, Zuri woke earlier than usual. She found herself walking toward the balcony, where Min-jae stood already, coffee in hand, staring at the city below. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing the ink of his tattoos curling along his arms, the scars etched across his skin. He looked untouchable, powerful, dangerous. Yet when he turned and his eyes softened at the sight of her, Zuri felt like maybe, just maybe, she was the only one who saw the man beneath all that armor. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head, her lips curving faintly. "The storm was too loud, but it wasn't so bad." "Because you weren't alone," he said simply. Zuri's heart raced. She didn't answer, but her silence spoke enough. As the morning sun spilled over them, she realized something terrifying, something thrilling. She was falling. And though she didn't know what it meant yet, or if she was ready, she couldn't stop the whispers of something more curling in her chest.
Hello besties, Zuri's world has been shattered by betrayal, but a mysterious man has stepped into her life. Will he be a savior or another danger she can't escape? Find out in episode 2. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.